This just changed everything for thousands of EB1 and EB2 India applicants waiting in the United States. The March 2026 Visa Bulletin dropped, and what we're seeing right now is movement that most people didn't expect at this point in the fiscal year. If you're holding an approved I-140, if you're on H-1B or EAD waiting for your green card, if you've been watching those priority dates every single month, like your future depends on it, because it does, you need to hear what just happened. We're talking about forward movement in categories that have been stuck for years. We're talking about families in California, Texas, New York, New Jersey, and Washington who are now closer to permanent residency than they were 30 days ago. But here's what nobody's telling you. This movement comes with risks, it comes with strategic decisions you need to make right now, and it comes with a timeline that could shift dramatically in the next 60 days. So stay with me for the next 15 minutes because we're breaking down every single detail that matters for your green card journey. Let me start with the numbers that everyone has been refreshing their browser for. The March 2026 Visa Bulletin just gave us something we haven't seen consistently in a long time: actual forward movement in both EB1 India and EB2 India categories. Now, before you start celebrating or panicking, we need to understand exactly what this means, how much movement we're talking about, and what the implications are for your adjustment of status application. Because here's the reality: not all movement is created equal, and the difference between filing dates and final action dates is going to determine whether you can actually file your I-485 or whether you're still in the waiting room watching everyone else move forward. Let's talk EB1 India first, because this is the category that shocked a lot of people. For years, EB1 was current or moving steadily, and then we hit that wall where highly skilled professionals, people with extraordinary ability, outstanding professors, multinational executives, suddenly found themselves in a backlog they never expected. The March 2026 final action date for EB1 India has moved forward. We're seeing priority dates advance into late 2022 and early 2023 territory, depending on the specific cutoff USCIS published. Now, that might sound modest to some of you, but if you've been stuck watching your priority date sit frozen for 6 months, 8 months, a year, this is significant. This means USCIS is actually processing cases. This means visa numbers are being allocated. This means the system, however slowly, is moving. But here's the part nobody is talking about. EB1 movement in March tells us something critical about visa number availability for the remainder of fiscal year 2026. We're past the halfway point of the fiscal year right now. We've already burned through a significant portion of the annual visa allocation. The fact that we're still seeing forward movement means one of two things: either demand in other categories softened slightly, creating spillover into EB1 India, or USCIS is managing the queue more efficiently than previous years. Either way, this is a window of opportunity. If your priority date is within striking distance of the current cutoff, you need to be ready. You need to have your medical exam scheduled. You need to have your documents organized. You need to have your attorney on speed dial, because when your date becomes current, the clock starts ticking, and you do not want to be the person scrambling to find a civil surgeon or missing a critical deadline because you weren't prepared. Now let's move to EB2 India, and this is where things get really interesting. EB2 India has been the most backlogged employment-based category for years. We're talking about skilled professionals with advanced degrees, people who came to the United States on F1 visas, graduated from American universities, worked on OPT, transitioned to H-1B, got their labor certification approved, filed their I-140, and then sat in line for years, watching their priority dates barely move. The March 2026 Visa Bulletin shows movement in EB2 India as well. We're seeing final action dates push into 2012, 2013, maybe even touching early 2014, depending on the specific cutoff. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking about people who filed their labor certifications over a decade ago finally getting their chance to file for adjustment of status. Now, this is where you need to understand the psychology of the backlog. When we talk about EB2 India moving into 2012 or 2013, that sounds ancient. That sounds like people who started their green card process when Instagram was new, when the iPhone 5 was just released, when the world was completely different. But here's what that means in practical terms. There are thousands of families in the United States right now who have been living in immigration limbo for 10, 12, 13 years. They've been on H-1B extensions. They've been using EAD. Their kids have aged out or are about to age out. They've changed jobs using I-140 portability. They've bought homes, built careers, paid taxes, contributed to their communities, and they've been waiting for this moment. For those families, this movement isn't just a priority date update. It's the difference between permanent stability and perpetual uncertainty. But here's the critical distinction you have to understand: final action dates versus filing dates. USCIS decides every month which chart they're going to use for accepting adjustment of status applications. The final action date is what determines who can actually get their green card approved. The filing date is what determines who can submit their I-485 application and start getting benefits like work authorization and travel permits through advance parole. For March 2026, USCIS has indicated which chart is applicable for filing. If you're in EB2 India and your priority date is before the filing date cutoff, you can file your I-485 even if the final action date hasn't reached you yet. This is huge because filing your I-485 unlocks benefits even before final approval. You get employment authorization that isn't tied to a specific employer. You get advance parole so you can travel internationally without worrying about H-1B stamping issues. You get protection against aging out for your children in many cases. This is why the filing date chart matters so much. Now, this is where things get serious. USCIS's decision to use the filing date chart or keep it open for EB1 and EB2 India in March 2026 tells us something about their confidence in visa number availability. They're not going to open the filing date chart if they think they're going to run out of visa numbers in 2 weeks. They're managing this based on projections, based on demand data, based on fiscal year quotas and spillover calculations. The fact that we have movement in March means USCIS believes they have enough visa numbers to process applications through the end of the fiscal year in September 2026. But, and this is a massive but, projections can be wrong. Demand can spike. A sudden surge in applications can overwhelm the system. And that's when we see retrogression. Let me explain what retrogression means for those of you who haven't lived through this nightmare yet. Retrogression is when the priority date cutoff moves backward. Imagine you're watching the Visa Bulletin every month, and your priority date is January 15th, 2013. In February, the cutoff is January 1st, 2013. You're close. In March, it moves to February 1, 2013. You're current. You're about to file. And then in April, the cutoff moves back to December 2012. You just got kicked out of the queue. That's retrogression. It happens when USCIS realizes they're allocating visa numbers too quickly, and they need to slow down to avoid exceeding the annual cap. It's brutal, it's demoralizing, and it's a very real risk as we head into the final months of fiscal year 2026. So what does this mean for your strategy? If you're in EB2 India and you've been considering downgrading to EB3 India to get faster movement, this March 2026 update might make you pause that decision. EB3 India has historically moved faster than EB2 India because there's more spillover from EB3 rest of world categories. A lot of applicants have been downgrading from EB2 to EB3, taking the strategic hit of moving to a lower category to get their green card faster. But if EB2 India is starting to show consistent movement, if the backlog is actually clearing rather than just shifting, then downgrading might not be worth the time and money spent on the process. You need to look at your specific priority date. You need to look at the trajectory of movement over the past 6 months, not just 1 month. You need to talk to an immigration attorney who can model out scenarios based on your individual case, because the wrong strategic decision here could cost you months or even years. For EB1 India applicants, the strategy conversation is different. A lot of people have been pivoting away from EB1 because of the backlog, pursuing EB1A extraordinary ability claims, or even considering O1 visas as alternatives. If you're a software engineer, a researcher, a startup founder, someone with patents or publications or significant contributions to your field, EB1A has been an attractive path because it doesn't require employer sponsorship. You can self-petition. But the calculus changes when EB1 employer-sponsored categories start moving again. If you already have an approved EB1 I-140 through your employer, and the priority dates are advancing, It might make more sense to stick with that rather than spending 6 months and tens of thousands of dollars building an EB1A case. On the other hand, if you're early in your career, if your employer-sponsored path is still stuck in perm or I-140 processing, then investing in EB1A or even national interest waiver in EB2 might still be worth it. The point is, the March 2026 Visa Bulletin changes the risk-reward calculation for every strategic decision you're making. Now let's talk about what this means for the broader population of skilled immigrants living in the United States. If you're on H-1B, this movement matters because green card certainty affects every other part of your life. It affects whether you can buy a house with confidence. It affects whether you can negotiate a better job offer. It affects whether your spouse can work on H-4 EAD without constantly worrying about policy changes. It affects whether you can travel internationally to see your family without the stress of visa stamping. If you're on OPT or OPT STEM extension and you're in the early stages of your green card process, seeing this movement tells you that the system does eventually work. It's slow, it's frustrating, it's opaque, but it moves. If you're already on EAD through a filed I-485, this movement might mean you're one step closer to final approval. And for families, especially families with children approaching 21 years old, this movement could be the difference between your child aging out of your application or staying protected under the Child Status Protection Act. There's one detail that could change everything, and it's something most people don't think about until it's too late. Visa number allocation is based on the fiscal year that runs from October to September, not the calendar year. We're in March 2026 right now, which means we're halfway through fiscal year 2026. USCIS has to allocate all available visa numbers by September 30th, 2026, or those numbers are lost forever. They don't roll over. Use it or lose it. This creates what's called end of fiscal year dynamics. As we get closer to September, USCIS often speeds up processing to use every available visa number. We might see additional movement in the July, August, or September visa bulletins. We might see USCIS push harder to approve cases, but we also might see them slam on the brakes if they think they're going to exceed the cap. This is why you have to watch every single month from now until September. This is why you cannot assume that March movement means April movement means May movement. The pattern can break at any time. Let me also address something that's causing confusion in the community right now: spillover effects. Every year, unused visa numbers from family-based categories and from EB categories for rest of world countries spill over into the backlogged categories like EB2 India and EB3 India. The amount of spillover varies every year based on demand patterns. In years where EB1 Rest of World or EB2 Rest of World are undersubscribed, those unused numbers flow to the backlog countries. In years where every category is maxed out, there's minimal spillover. The March 2026 movement suggests we're getting some level of spillover this year, which is positive. But spillover numbers aren't confirmed until the fiscal year ends and USCIS publishes the data. So when you see movement now, you're seeing USCIS's best estimate of what they can sustain. That estimate can change. So where does this leave us? What should you actually do with this information? First, if your priority date is within 6 months of the current final action date or filing date cutoff, treat your case as if it could become current tomorrow. Get your documents ready. Schedule your medical exam. Make sure your passport is valid. Make sure your employment letter is current. Make sure you have tax returns, pay stubs, everything USCIS could possibly ask for. Second, if you're not current yet, but you're in the multi-year backlog, use this movement as a psychological boost, but not a reason to make rash decisions. Don't quit your job. Don't change your immigration strategy without professional advice. Don't assume this movement will continue at the same pace. Third, if you're just starting your green card process now, understand that what you're seeing in March 2026 is the reality for people who started 10 or 12 years ago. Your timeline will be different. The backlog dynamics will be different. Plan accordingly. There's also a broader policy conversation happening right now that affects all of this. Congress has been debating employment-based immigration reform for years. Bills that would eliminate per-country caps, bills that would increase overall visa numbers, bills that would create special carve-outs for STEM graduates. None of these have passed yet, but the political winds shift. The March 2026 Visa Bulletin is a snapshot of the current system, the system as it exists with all its limitations and backlogs. If legislation passes, everything changes overnight. But until that happens, this is the reality we're working with. For those of you living in major immigration hubs, California's Bay Area and Southern California, Texas cities like Austin and Dallas, New York, New Jersey, the Seattle area and Washington, you're part of communities where this Visa Bulletin update is a major conversation. You're working with colleagues who are in the same boat. You're attending the same community events. You're feeling the same stress about priority dates and filing dates and final action dates. Use that community, share information, learn from each other's experiences, but also be careful about anecdotal advice. Your neighbor's case might be different from yours in ways that matter. Your coworker's priority date might be 6 months different, which puts them in a completely different processing reality. Always verify critical decisions with qualified immigration attorneys. So here's the bottom line. The March 2026 Visa Bulletin shows forward movement in both EB1 India and EB2 India. This is positive. This is real progress for thousands of families who have been waiting years for this moment. But this movement comes with uncertainty. We're in the second half of the fiscal year. Retrogression risk is real. Spillover calculations are estimates. USCIS processing times can shift. What you need to do right now is assess where your priority date stands relative to the current cutoffs, prepare your documents as if you could file tomorrow, and make strategic decisions based on data, not hope. If you're current or close to current, this is your moment. If you're years away, use this as motivation to stay patient and stay prepared. I want to hear from you in the comments. What's your priority date? What category are you in? Are you current after this March update, or are you still waiting? Drop your information below, because this community learns from each other. And if this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening with the March 2026 Visa Bulletin, hit that subscribe button. We do this every single month. We break down the Visa Bulletin. We analyze policy changes. We give you the strategic insights you need to navigate this system. The green card journey is long, it's complicated, and it's constantly changing. But you don't have to figure it out alone. I'll see you in the next update.